Hey guys, so it's an interesting video on Wild Rift. So we're back with a patch 3.1b tier list. Now I know I said I wouldn't be doing the tier list, but two reasons why I'm gonna do it. Firstly, patch 3.1b is lasting a very long time because we're gonna be getting patch 3.2 in the middle of May. So it's gonna be taking some time. And secondly, I feel that especially in the Baron lane and jungle, there have been quite a number of significant changes that we do have to cover. And as you guys can see, nowadays, from this video onwards, I shouldn't say nowadays, I'm gonna be putting up those three, I don't know what you want to call it, maybe PowerPoint slides or whatever you want to call it at the start of the video, so I don't have to explain one or all of those at the start of every single video. But anyways, guys, as you can see here, we are going to get into the Baron lane. Alright, so here we have the Baron lane. So as you guys can see, the most major change, of course, is Fiora dropping out of the S plus tier. So what this basically means is there used to be Darius, Camille, and Fiora in the S plus tier. Now I think Darius is still pretty good, but I have dropped Darius out of the S plus tier because personally I feel that even though Darius is very, very strong as a champion, it generally relies on the enemy team not knowing how to play around him, like not letting him stack to 5, not letting him execute, etc. So if the whole team knows how to play against Darius, like especially in higher elos, I feel it's really hard to play Darius. I've tried a couple of matches on Darius, and I'm not the best Darius or top lane player, but I really feel that it kind of really relies a lot on your opponents not knowing how to play against Darius properly, which is why I feel like Darius, while he is really, really good with the new devs dance, I just don't think he's quite in S plus tier in my personal opinion. But who I do think is in the S plus tier is, of course, Camille, who is still there, unchanged. I think Renekton and Sett moves up from S to S plus because Sett, I actually feel, despite his nerfs, is still really, really strong in the lane. And really easy to begin your snowball, and therefore just really easy to carry yourself and your team. And Renekton, especially with Fiora going down, his matchups against Sett and Camille, and as well as a lot of the others like Darius, for example, are a lot better than against Fiora. So he's getting a lot better. And furthermore, his Q got sort of a mini buff. I would say it's adjustment, but most people call it a buff. But that isn't really the main reason. I think Renekton has just always been very good, and I think just the fact that you're seeing Fiora a lot less now just makes him stronger, because Fiora was one of his not very good matchups. So in the S tier, we still have Jace still hanging on in the S tier. I'm not sure if I moved him up from A+, but basically Jace now with the new Youmuu's Ghostblade goes for like half lethality, and then you go into fighter later on, so not really full fighter anymore. And the lethality does work for him really well, so with the buff to Youmuu's, he did benefit quite a bit from it. Now Aurelia, I still believe, is one of the strongest champions in the entire game at the current moment in the meta. So even in the top lane where her matchups are not as good, I still believe you can get yourself ahead by, for example, roaming to mid, or going for skirmishes at Skullcrab, etc. So I still think she's S tier, but her matchups itself in the Baron lane aren't very good. Like, you aren't really going to be killing a Camille or a Sett unless they make some major error, even with your ultimate and your ignite, I do believe. So next up, we have Riven, we have Garen, and we have Wukong. All of these just really good in general for their own reasons. Garen is tanky, but we're in a Sunder meta, so there's no way he's S+. Riven, very big to CC, and there's a lot of CC in the meta, so not quite there, but still pretty good. And Wukong, just a very good teamfight ultimate. And Fiora, because of the nerf on her Q, actually is dropping down to the S tier, because I don't believe she's that good anymore. But she is still really good, especially if you can play her, so she's still at least in the S tier. Now in the A+ tier, Mundo and Malphite, mostly because the fact that they're tanks. Gragas now actually goes full AP, but his matchups in the top lane are pretty bad. So in the mid lane and in the jungle, he's way better. And Olaf, I actually moved up from A+, because Olaf is a pretty strong champion right now. We'll talk about him a little bit more in the jungle. Shen, same deal, he is a tank, and he's just not so good in Wild Rift, because you don't have the item Tiamat, so his wave clear is pretty bad. And yeah, so his main strategy you normally go for in PC is that you would split push with the Tiamat, and then you would use your ult to join a team fight on the opposite side of the map. But because he doesn't have Tiamat or one of the Titanic items in Wild Rift. He doesn't really push very fast, so you can't really do what you want to do with that. Alright, so we're going to talk a little bit about Nasus. So Nasus, in my opinion, he is alright. Like, as you guys can see, he's A tier, he's average. In my opinion, Nasus, obviously you get to late game, unquestionably he's very strong. In the early game, unquestionably he's very weak. And a lot of champions can abuse Nasus right now. Like, take a look at Nasus versus Camille, Renekton, and Sett. Even Darius, Jace, you know, he's just gonna get destroyed. But if you can get past the early laning phase, and I have actually playtested Nasus just for this tier list, I was up against a Camille, and I was basically hugging my Tara the entire time. She didn't ever manage to kill me because the jungler never really came around. But honestly, if the jungler came around, I think that they could easily have dived me, especially post level 5, but I did eventually manage to survive the lane matchup, and I even got a solo kill on her after I got my first item, the Divine Sunderer. But doesn't change the fact that I think Nasus is just not too good. I think he's alright. Like, he's A tier. I don't think he's below average. I think he's just alright. Just because he's so good in the late game and he's so weak in the early game. So his weak early game can definitely take advantage of and be punished. And assuming that your entire rest of the team isn't doing too well and you're getting punished by the jungler, that there's no way back into the match, in my opinion. So, other changes I made in the Baron lane tier list, I moved Kayle down into the trash tier, into the D tier, because especially Kayle in the Baron lane, I really think it will never work. I think she loses every single matchup above her. She literally doesn't win against anybody. The only thing that she wins is if your opponent gets overconfident and doesn't take into account when she has ult, which I do see happening more very often, actually, that the opponent just forgets Kayle has an ultimate, dives her on the tower, Kayle ult, and they just die basically to the tower. Happens very often, but as long as you know how to play around Kayle's ultimate, Kayle is absolutely nothing. Like, she's basically half a champion until she reaches like full level and like 3 to 4 items. So basically you're even disadvantaging your own team by picking Kayle, and I really hate to see Kayle on my team. So Kayle just really bad. So I'm going to briefly actually discuss Vayne and Lucian. I think that they are very specific counter picks against certain champions, which is why I put them below average, because I really don't think you can pick them in every situation. Like, let's say into a Nasus, you pick like a Vayne or a Lucian, he's gonna get destroyed. Even maybe into a Darius, like those are really good matchups for them. But imagine you pick like, you know, Vayne into something like a Camille. Like, it's not really gonna work out very well against a Renekton. It's not really gonna work out all that well because they're a little bit too mobile and they can catch up with you, get onto you. If jungle ganks, you're pretty much just dead. So anyways, we spent enough time talking about the Baron lane. Now let's actually talk about the jungle. And as you guys can see, for the first time in a long time, the S plus tier is populated by champions other than Lee Sin and Kha'Zix. Now obviously Lee Sin and Kha'Zix, in my opinion, still the two best junglers that you can carry with if you're really good at them. Lee Sin just has been strong for like over a year now. Kha'Zix, pretty much since his release, he's pretty much been S plus tier even after the nerfs. But now Olaf. Now I've actually played jungle quite a bit recently, and I've picked Olaf up in a lot of matches. Like, even in the matches that I lose, I feel that always, if you know how to play Olaf properly, you always do like the most damage and tank the most. Like, I'm always getting that, like, you know, the center of attention medal at the end of the game, where you do the most damage, have the most DPS, and take the most damage at the same time. Like, Olaf is just a machine. He immunes CC. He does true damage, but the only thing is he is pretty stat checky of a champion. So if you pick the wrong fight and you get put behind early, you're gonna be in trouble. So the only thing is, especially the early game, it's really important to pick your fights carefully and, you know, get a kill and snowball off of that. And after you get to a certain point, you get a couple of kills, you're just unstoppable. You just, in a literal sense and in a figurative sense as well, you just go up to someone and you just press all your buttons, mash all your buttons, just auto attack them, and they're basically dead. If you get hit by CC, just ult and you're basically all golden. So yeah, Olaf really strong at the moment. Evelynn, I finally decided to move her up to S plus after testing her myself. She just one-shots anybody who's not building any MR in the late game without even hitting the charm. Like, I went up against, like, I think it was Jhin and Orianna, and basically when I get near them, before they even realize the exclamation mark is on them, I press E, Q auto, and with the electrocute proc, they just instantly die. No need to ult, no need to charm, nothing. So she still one-shots people in the late game. And the main reason why I put her in S+, not because of her late game, but it's because, like, in solo queue, the invisibility is just so good because they just don't know when you're coming. They don't communicate, they don't deep ward. They ward like in the river, but it doesn't matter because you're already invisible by then. They don't know you're coming, and it's so easy to abuse Evelynn and just just get kills, snowball, etc. So Evelynn is just really good. Now Nunu, I feel, is really underrated at the moment because despite after getting his buffs, he actually isn't picked that much. So in my opinion, the best build for Nunu is Rod of Ages into full tank, starting off with a Sunfire Aegis. We're not building Death Cap because that will make him way too squishy. But even going this more or less full tank build, just with the Rod of Ages being your only AP item, he does a lot of damage while being really tanky. Like his Q does a lot of damage, together with his W, his E, and his ult. It does I wouldn't say insane amounts of damage, but really decent damage considering how tanky you are. So I really think Nunu is really strong at the moment. And if you're good at him, just perma-ganking lanes with your snowball, it's going to put your team ahead and it's going to put you ahead, and there really is nothing the enemy team can do about it. Alright, so next up, we're going to talk about Xin Zhao, who I already mentioned in the previous tier list, that with Black Cleaver and Divine Sunder combo, he's really strong at the moment. Wins 1v1s against majority of champions. Of course, he's gonna have trouble against someone like an Olaf, Lee Sin, Pantheon. Maybe it's gonna be quite close depending on your resources at the point in time. But he generally wins most fights. Irelia in the S tier in the jungle, just because obviously Irelia is a really strong champion at the moment, and you know what happens when we have strong champions. They normally turn up in the jungle, and you're normally around S or S plus tier. So that is Irelia at this current point in time. Now Gragas, I actually moved him up all the way to the S tier because now, even though Evelynn is your best AP option and she's in the S plus tier, Gragas building full AP easily one-shots people. Like in the jungle, you go for like Luden's, Echo, Lich Bane, and like Death Cap. Like even before your Death Cap, I think it's relatively easy to just one-shot someone, and after you hit like items like Death Cap and Oblivion Orb, you easily one-shot people without even using your ult. If you can like Body Slam, Enhanced Auto with your W, and Q them, they're instantly just one-shot combined with the Electrocute. So he also has, of course, a lot of utility with his Body Slam and with his Cask to, engage or disengage. So Gragas just all around very good. Now I moved Rengar down actually because although I feel Rengar is still really good, especially with the new Ghost Blade and with his tanky build, I just don't really see Rengar's carrying so hard anymore. And in theory, Rengar could be like top of S tier because you could snowball and just carry, but on the flip side, if you don't snowball, you really provide nothing to your team. You have no CC, no nothing. So if you don't do well on Rengar, he's very feast or famine, and you basically are like half a champion on your team. So I moved Jarvan up because I tested Jarvan recently, and Jarvan and Vi, same goals, like same build with Xin Zhao, going for like Black Cleaver into Divine Sunder into the normal items of like Death's Dance, Sterak's Gauge, and GA. Jarvan is actually really strong at the moment. He does decent damage while being really tanky, so I think Jarvan moves up. Really good ganks, really strong early game as well. And now we're going to discuss a couple of interesting picks. So first up, Fiora, all the way down from the S plus / S tier from the couple of patches, obviously because of the range nerf. She really isn't very good at the moment. I believe Fiora jungle is going to vanish from the jungle mana really soon because she was only really picked in the jungle because she was that good. But now that she's not so good anymore, I don't think people will be picking her jungle for too much longer. And Master Yi, dropping all the way down from the S tier to the A tier. Now, I don't think he's bad. I think he's average. Like, especially in low elo, I still think he's going to be really good. But in, like, maybe like Emerald or Diamond and above, most people know how weak Master Yi's early game is. They nerfed, his jungle clear. They nerfed his Q damage. They nerfed his Q scaling, which his Q is basically his most important spell, as we all know. It's his main source of damage. So with that, Master Yi now clears at a pretty average speed. Although they didn't specifically affect his champion damage on Q, but the base damage nerf as well as the scaling nerf really hurts Master Yi. I tried him out and I couldn't believe how much weaker he felt with that simple nerf on Q, which didn't seem to be too bad at first glance, but really it's kind of kicked Master Yi all the way down the tier list. And I think Master Yi is back at the same spot he has always been, maybe a little bit better because his Q can still 4-hit onto a single champion, but I think he's just all right. So now something I want to actually point out is that the fact that the Scuttle changes of giving less XP did help champions like, for example, Amumu, Shyvana, Master Yi, and a couple of those farming junglers, but I really don't feel that the impact of that Scuttle change is so huge that it's going to affect the tier list all that much. Alright, so the rest of the jungle tier list is as shown. Malphite and Nasus jungle, I still see it from time to time for some reason. It's complete garbage, so it's in the trash tier. Alright, so now we're going to move on into the mid lane. Alright, so from the mid lane onwards, there really isn't so much changes. I'm not going to be discussing too much. Now, firstly, there is no trash tier for mid lane, because even Kayle in the mid lane, although I still think she's really bad, I still think picking Kayle is sabotaging your team, but I don't think she's trashed here completely, at least compared to the Baron lane, because you can still sort of make her work if you really play very, very safe. Just hug the tower all the time because of your proximity to the tower. But yeah, I'm still really not high on Kayle. But as you guys can see, at the top of the tier list, S plus tier, first champion, strongest champion in the mid lane, in my opinion, is Irelia. Now, I've been spamming a lot of Irelia mid, and I'm really not a good Irelia. Like, I miss half of my W's, and sometimes I Q the wrong person. I'm aiming for the low HP minion. I Q onto the enemy Yasuo instead, and I don't get the reset off my Q. But even with kind of scuffed Irelia mechanics, I can still carry games. I still get like S's and A's pretty much every single match of Irelia I play, even those that I start with like 2 deaths, that kind of deal. But I really think Irelia is just really that strong, and you just have to be like somewhat decent on her, not even completely good at her. I still think she works, and if you're actually good at her, competent on her, oh my, she's gonna be destroying the enemies. Irelia is so good at the moment. That's all I can really say. The rest of the S plus tier pretty much remains the same. Diana still really strong, very good damage, AoE team fights. I don't really think I have to explain Ziggs and Karma again. Zed is still in the S plus tier, barely hanging on. I moved him down a little bit compared to other picks. I don't actually see him that much, but on the times I do see him, he still like one-shots people and snowballs all the way despite the nerfs to his E. And in the S tier, pretty much everything there is the same. I moved Gragas up into the S tier because I think his mid lane matchups are way better. This is full AP one-shot Gragas, by the way. I think Gragas is really strong at the moment. I think he's quite underrated, quite underpicked, but I do think Gragas is really strong at the moment. And some other picks like Katarina, as I explained a ton of times before, she'll always be in the S tier because you can hard carry on her, but she's hard countered by CC, which sometimes you can't do too much about. Now in the A plus tier, I have champions like Akali and Twisted Fate. Now Twisted Fate mainly is there because he's a very team-reliant champion. Like, he roams and he gets his other lanes ahead. Now, he can get himself ahead, but at the end of the day, he's just a stun bot, and he doesn't really do that much damage. So Twisted Fate really is for the roams, for the numbers advantage, for getting your other members ahead. And in solo queue, that's not exactly what you want, because you want yourself to be fed, and you want to be the carry, so Twisted Fate can't really fulfill that role all that much. And the rest of the tier list pretty much remains the same. There's a ton of solid average mid-tier picks like, Brand, Veigar, Ahri, you guys can see for yourself, but we're not going to spend too much time discussing it. But I will just briefly mention that Aurelion Sol, although I put him in the C tier, like, there are like a couple of one or two good Aurelion Sol players that make him seem like S tier, but by and large, Aurelion Sol players that I see are all pretty bad, and therefore, I think the champion is pretty bad, but I still think you can make him work if you're really that good at him. But now we can actually move on to talking about ADCs. Alright, so ADCs, you guys know my bread and butter role, my main role. My favorite part of the show is to talk about, but really there isn't too much to talk about. There is pretty much nothing, pretty much no changes aside from me moving Vayne to S plus tier. Now, firstly, even in the ADC meta, I don't even think anybody is C tier. Like, I think most Ashe and like Farming Senna are below average. I don't even think that they're that bad, because I think the ADC meta is really balanced at the moment. Now, Kai'Sa obviously is still the best ADC. Jinx, a little bit controversial, but I think she's just really good with the new Stormrazor buff. She spikes very, very early, she snowballs very easily, and she can just take over games. I really do believe she's S+. Vayne, with the new Stormrazor as well, I really think she I underrated her a little bit by putting her in S because I think she can just hard carry really easily in S plus. And you do, although you have a weak early game, you have a lot of agency, you have your invisibilities, your constant mobility with your tumble and your tank shredding potential, and just Vayne is just really good basically. Then in the S tier we have the whole battery of the Storm Razor champions together with Varus, who is really strong at the moment. A plus we have some of the weaker Storm Razor champions like Jhin and Tristana. We have MF still good in certain situations. Same goes with Ezreal. And Lucian, I think, barely misses out on the S tier. Now, even though he doesn't make so good use of Storm Razor, in my opinion, I think he's still a really good champion who can still carry games just because of the nature of solo queue. He's really strong early game, so you can get kills in the early game, snowball and take over games. So I do think Lucian is still pretty good. I might even move him up to S in the future, but I really don't think he takes advantage of Storm Razor so much. Now, I have a bold prediction that if Storm Razor happens to catch a nerf, or if Essence Reaver happens to catch a meaningful buff, I think Lucian is not going to be building Storm Razor. He's just going to be building Essence Reaver, because at this point in time, he's this close to actually building Essence Reaver instead of Storm Razor. It's just that the cost of Essence Reaver is just way too high for what it's giving you, and Storm Razor is just a more gold efficient item, so that's why you're building it. And that down in the A and the B tier, A tier we have Fasting Senna, B we have Farming Senna, and we have, of course, the AP options as well. S tier AP options, of course, Corki, Karma, Orianna, Ziggs, and in the A tier we have Veigar and Brand. Don't pick the A tier APCs, just pick the S tier ones if you really need to, but APC is not so strong at the moment because of the Storm Razor meta and how strong ADCs are at the moment. But if your team needs AP, sometimes you just don't have a choice, so sometimes you just gotta go for those AP options, and those AP options are there. Now, not too much to discuss about the ADCs, now we can actually discuss the supports instead. Now, honestly, same story with supports. There hasn't been too many changes. Actually, I don't think there's any changes that I actually made to the support role. I think this is the complete same as what it was. Now, we all know Karma is broken. Really good in buffing your team. Really good utility. Really good poke. Thresh does everything except heal. He engages. He peels. He slows. He stuns. He shields. He does everything. He just great playmaking support. All around is really good. Now Yuumi just got another buff, and she was already S plus tier. Now Yuumi is just completely broken as long as you have someone who you can actually attach to, like an Olaf, like a Vayne, like someone who can hard carry your team. With you on their back, man, they're just gonna be unstoppable. Now, I think Nami and Lulu barely hang on to S plus tier. I think they're somewhere between S plus and S tier. Not quite good enough to be S plus tier, not quite bad enough to be in S tier, but basically Karma and Yuumi are essentially kind of better versions of Nami and Lulu at the moment. They're just better enchanters than them at the moment. But Nami and Lulu are still really strong in their own ways. Rakan best engaged support. Braum really good at blocking projectiles. Really good at proccing his Winter's Bite. Or is it called Winter? No, his concussive blows. His passive still really handy. Janna's still really useful in this meta where there's a lot of champions like Lee Sin and Irelia that want to engage into your team, and disrupting them would do a world of good. Now, Blitzcrank I actually put in, A plus tier, because as I mentioned with his W buff, I actually think he is pretty good now, and if he can hit hooks, he can actually be really good. Soraka, maybe overrating a little bit, but I think she's actually really good, especially in the meta now that ADCs are so strong. With Soraka constantly topping them up on the health, I think she's really good. Now, A is most of the tank engage supports, because firstly, tanks are not good in the meta because of Divine Thunder, but also, secondly, they're still average because they are still really good at doing what they're doing, which is tanking and which is engaging, so they still are really good at their jobs. Now, I know Sona has been really popular recently, but I just don't see it. Basically, because she's so weak early game that she can get abused early game. Like pretty much every match I play against Sona, I just get at least a kill or two on her in the early game and put her behind, put myself ahead. And yes, when you reach late game, Sona is really good, but it's the same problem as a lot of other champions like Nasus and Veigar. Like, yeah, you reach late game, you're going to be really strong, but your early game is just so weak that, good players can take advantage of that. C tier, I still see a lot of supports that are really bad. Now, honestly, I would say the C tier are kind of trash tier supports, but that would mean I have nobody to put into C tier at all. It'll be an empty C tier with a D tier, which I was considering kind of doing, but yeah, I'm just for the tiers not looking weird, I'm just gonna put them in the C tier. But basically, I still see Greg as support, building tank, still see Annie support, still see Pantheon, and still see Malphite. All of these are bad. Annie and Malphite is because of the level 5. Gragas is situationally alright, like, you know, maybe with Yasuo or something, which is a weird ADC pick in the first place. But Yasuo is, not Yasuo. Gragas is just so good in so many other roles, like, why would you pick him in support? And Pantheon is just way too predictable. He has no range, and the only thing he can do is engage with his W, so it's really obvious what he wants to do, so he's not really good for that reason. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the end of the tier list. Now, I spent a lot of time, of course, discussing top lane and jungle, which is where the main changes are at, and the rest, not too many changes, but yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. So thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.